And a very good morning, afternoon, depending on which time zone you happen to be in. We're coming to you live on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network right here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Thank you very much for listening. Perhaps you might be listening on one of the podcast platforms, such as Apple Podcasts or maybe iHeartRadio Podcast or Amazon, either one. Welcome to the show. We have a lot to talk about today. We have one NBA game to take a close look at and see where the line movement is going, and of course, in which direction the pros are going. And we also have two baseball games on tap for today. The one basketball game, of course, the Bucks and the Nets is the only game on the schedule. In baseball, we got Baltimore against Cleveland and Texas against the Astros. Houston against Texas. Okay, that's the story there. So once again, thanks for listening. I'm Chris Pardo, and of course, we're here every Monday through Friday, 12 noon Eastern Time, Saturdays and Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So as usual, what we're going to talk about today is generally the same stuff we've talked about most of the time over the past couple of weeks. You got the NBA playoff game, you have a couple of baseball games, and we're also going to go into some detail about talking about contrarian betting, getting emails saying, what is this contrarian betting? What is it all about? We're going to try to give you an idea as to what the whole story is as far as contrarian betting is concerned. So, as usual, if you've listened to the show before, you know that one of the first things we do, we take a look at what happened yesterday as far as betting is concerned in the major sports, baseball, basketball, and hockey. This way, you kind of get an idea as to how the favorites are doing, how the underdogs are doing, the home teams as opposed to the road teams. We'll kind of tell you what's going on so that you can utilize this data, implement it with whatever system you're using right now to kind of help make you a better handicapper. Because, as always, the primary purpose of the show is to make you a better handicapper. So let's get started right now. Let's look at the National Hockey League for yesterday. The Golden Knights, a minus 270, beat the Canadiens 4-1 in game one of their semifinal series. The total stayed under 5.5 goals. Meanwhile, the favorites and the Dogs are 1-1 in this particular round. The favorites still lead 35-30 in the entire playoff series. The home and road teams were 1-1 in this round so far, and they also lead 35-33 overall. The unders went 2-0 in the round. They now lead at almost 54%. So that's the National Hockey League. Meanwhile, in the NBA, the Clippers, being a 5-point favorite, covered easily as the home favorite, 118-104, as they beat the Jazz to even their second round series at 2-2. The total stayed under the 224-point mark. Meanwhile, the Hawks, 3-point dogs, upset the 76ers 103-100 to also even their series at 2-2. The under in that game went under 226.5 points. The unders are now 10-6 in this round, but the over-unders are tied 29-29 for the entire playoff series so far. So right now the unders are 10-6. The unders overall 50-50, 29-29. In Major League Baseball, the favorites, they went 9-4. You had big upsets by the Reds at a plus 127 against the Brewers. The Rockies finally beat the Padres plus 140 on the money line. The Tigers were at 132 on the money line against the Royals, and the Mariners are plus 127 against the Twins. The favorites still lead, however. They're at 57.7, almost 58% so far on the season. The unders went 9-3-1 yesterday. The unders now have the lead by 472 to 471. So that's a wrap up of things that happened yesterday as far as the three major sports are concerned. Kind of give you an idea as to how the home teams did, how the road teams are doing, the overs, unders. Again, these are the type of statistics that you need to kind of help you get through and pick the proper games and the proper teams. So again, if you're new at it, try to keep an idea of what we're talking about, make some notes or whatever, because these could really help you in the long run, depending on, doesn't matter what system you're using, because at some point in time, you're finally going to get to the point where you're going to look at a game, you want to bet the game, but somehow both teams, they start looking different. First, team A looks better than team B. Then as you look at it a little closer, team B starts looking better. It gets to the point where your mind, the game is a toss-up, but you really do want to bet it. So perhaps knowing whether it's a favorite or not, or whether it's a road team or not, as to what the stats are for that particular type of game, might help you to determine which team to bet on in that situation. In the meantime, if you have any questions, very easy to get a hold of us. We're right here at the Sports Wagering Zone. Send the email to the Sports Wagering Zone at gmail.com. That's the Sports Wagering Zone at gmail.com. We're also still working on getting that newsletter put together. So if you have any interest in it, and this is the type of data that we can send to you in the newsletter that you can keep on file. This way you can always take a look back at it and see what the story is. So if you're interested in the newsletter, by all means, send us that email to the Sports Wagering Zone at gmail.com and just simply say, yes, I'm interested. We'll keep you on file. We'll get in touch with you if and when everything kind of gets together. We're shooting for the start of the NFL and college football season. We'll see what we can do. We'll keep you updated on that as well. So that's the story as far as what happened yesterday. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at the one NBA game that's on tap for today, kind of let you know what's going on there, which direction the pros are going, and of course, which direction the line movement is going as well. So we'll be back into the Sports Wagering Zone. And like I said, if you've listened to the show before, we take 3 breaks. Each one is of about a minute or so duration. So if that's the case, we will be back in 1 minute. And welcome back. You're back in the Sports Wagering Zone. I'm Chris Pardo, coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina, right here on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, or perhaps listening on one of the podcast platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, or any of the other major podcast platforms that are available. In the meantime, let's take a look at some action going on today. See where the money is flowing, see which direction the line movement is going. One NBA game on tap for tonight, 8:30 Eastern Time. The Milwaukee Bucks and the Brooklyn Nets. Now, this is Game 5. It's an Eastern Conference semifinal game. The series is tied at 2-2. And after they lost the first 2 games in Brooklyn, the Bucks have bounced back. got a couple of wins on their home court, including the 107-96 win in Game 4, easily winning that game outright as a 2-point home dog as well in that game. Meanwhile, in tonight's game, that's a pivotal game. It's Game 5. It kind of goes one way or another. The Bucks opened as a 2.5-point road favorite. Now, the pros have really come in on the Bucks. They drove the line from being a 2.5 up to a 4-point favorite. Now, that's a big move. Some shops are even going toward 4.5. We kind of checked on that in Vegas before we came on the air. The elephant in the room, as we always say, and the big reason for the steam going toward Milwaukee is the fact that Brooklyn will be down 2 of their 3-star players. Not only Kyrie Irving with his ankle problem, but also James Harden with a hamstring are going to be out for this particular game. So the road favorites are 12-5 against the spread so far in the postseason. That's at 71%. Road favorites at 71% so far in the postseason. Now, the short favorites, now we're talking about favorites that are 5 points or less, are 26-14 against the spread, or at 65%. But again, at some point in time, this particular game, the way the line has been moving, may go beyond that 5.5-5-point number, therefore taking it out of that particular analytical category. Now, favorites with a line move that's in their favor are at 63% so far in this playoff season. The favorites are 41-24 against the spread. That's 63%, including 10-6 against the spread, which is at 63% in round 2 as well. So let me just remind you of that once again. Favorites with a line move in their favor are 25-15, or at 63% so far. Favorites are at 63% so far. Meanwhile, in round 2, the favorites are at 63%. They're at 63% overall, and they're also at 63% in this particular round 2 as well. The under has also taken in some smart money, some pro money as well. We've seen the total drop from 220 down to 217.5. The under, it's a perfect 4-0 so far in this series. The unders are 10-6, 63% so far in round 2. Now, keep this in mind. When the total is less than 220, the under is at 62% in the postseason. Now, with the series tied at 2-2, the Bucks are now a slight favorite to win this particular round and go on. They're at minus 165 on the money line, and the Nets are now a plus 140 dog to win the series. So there's a little switch in that particular situation. All along, the Brooklyn Nets have been favored not only to win the series, but they've also been favored to win the overall tournament and being the champs. So you want to take a close look at that. And of course, as always, check with your local sportsbook, because the numbers we're talking about are out of Las Vegas. They might change slightly somewhere, although Vegas is still the focal point of all gambling and sports betting so far. Yes, I know it's going on big. We got 27 states that are involved in it. We have more states coming on board real soon. So that's the story there. So as we look at this game once again, the Milwaukee Bucks and the Brooklyn Nets, the pros in this particular game are on the Milwaukee Bucks and laying the points. Now, to give you once again a general idea as to how well following the pros has gone so far within the playoff picture, yesterday we had 2 plays. The Philadelphia and Atlanta. We had Philadelphia. Obviously, saw Atlanta pulled off an upset. That was a losing situation. Meanwhile, the Jazz and the Clippers, we had the Clippers in that game, which was a win. So we were 50-50 for yesterday. As we look at the entire playoff situation, we had 43 bets going into today. We had 29 winners, which still brings you at 67.4%. So not a bad way to kind of watch and follow a particular group and see how well they're doing. They do generally in that lower 60% bracket, sometimes 58, 59%. So when they're at 67%, you know they're doing very, very well. And of course, within that situation, because we know the favorites have been doing very, very well, there have been some underdogs that have actually come in during that time period as well. So once again, looking at the game for tonight, Milwaukee Bucks against the Brooklyn Nets. Take a close look at it. As far as the pros are concerned, they like the Milwaukee Bucks. So that's the story with basketball. That's the only game that's being played tonight, the only game that you can actually bet on. So we have two Major League Baseball games to take a look at right after the break. The Baltimore Orioles against the Cleveland Indians, and the battle for Texas, the Texas Rangers and the Houston Astros. So those are the two games we're going to take a closer look at, take a look and see how the line movement is going, and also trying to determine in which direction the pros are going in it as well. So we're going to take our second break, and of course, as always, we will be back right after this. And welcome back. Welcome back to the Sports Wagering Zone. I'm Chris Pardo, coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina, right here on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network. Also podcasting on most of your major podcast platforms. And, of course, TV on the East Coast on Blackjack Television, as well as Mile High Radio in the Colorado area as well. So we took a look at the one basketball game on tap for tonight, and I'll recap it once again just in case you just tuned in. The Bucks and the Nets, in that particular game, the pros are on the Bucks and laying the points. Not only the pros, but all the analytics seem to be pointing in that direction as well. Meanwhile, in Major League Baseball, we got two games to take a look at. First of all, around 7 o'clock or so, that's Eastern time, of course. Baltimore Orioles, 22-43, playing against the Cleveland Indians, who were 35-28. The Indians beat the Orioles 4-3 in last night's series' first game, cashed in as a minus 156 home favorite. It marked the fifth straight loss for Baltimore. They own the second worst record in Major League Baseball. They're only behind Arizona in that particular category. So in tonight's rematch, the Orioles send out their veteran righty, Matt Harvey. He's 3-7, but with a 7.41 ERA. And the Indians come back with their young righty, Cal Quantrill. He's 0-2 on the season, but he has a 3.21 ERA. Now, as we look at the line for this game, it opened with Cleveland, listed as a minus 160 home favorite at the open, and Baltimore a plus 145 road dog. Now, the pros are now smarting themselves on this one as well. They're celebrating Fade Harvey Day by steaming up the Indians from minus 160 to minus 165 on the money line. Betting against Harvey has gone 8-5 so far this season, including a 5-2 over his last 7 starts. Let me repeat that. Betting against Harvey has been very good this season, 8-5, and it's been 5-2 over the last 7 starts against him. Cleveland also finds themselves in a sweet spot for a non-divisional home favorite. That sweet spot is money line numbers between 150 and 175 on the minus side. Now, that particular situation so far this season is at 70%, teams within that sweet spot. Now, there also appears to be some liability on the under in this particular game. The total in this game is 9, but they've juiced up the under to a minus 120. So we've talked about this before, try to illustrate to you what happens when the juice starts flowing. The signals that come out is it may possibly move and drop that 9 down to 8.5. Now, of course, the weather in this situation could play a factor. The forecast calls for 15 mile per hour winds blowing directly in from center field. In from center field, 15 miles per hour. The Tribe are 20-13 as a favorite this season. Baltimore, they're 20-35 as a dog. Cleveland is 20-14 against righties. Baltimore is 14-27 against righties. Cleveland is 17-13. Baltimore is 11-22 on the road. So in this particular game, not only do the pros, but also the analytics seem to point to the Cleveland Indians in this game. Meanwhile, Texas Rangers and the Houston Astros, that's an 8 o'clock game. This is the Battle of Texas. Texas Rangers are from North Texas up against the Houston Astros down from the southern part of the state. The Rangers are 25-41. Astros are a little better, 37-28. This is game 1. It's only a 2-game series. They're American League Western rivals, big rivals. Of course, they're in-state rivals. The Rangers are in a tailspin as of late. They've gone 3-14 over their past 17 games. In the meantime, looking at the Astros, they just took 2 or 3 against the Twins and are now 10-4 over the last 14 games. Now, as we look at tonight's series opener, Texas starts their veteran, Kyle Gibson, who's undefeated this season. He's 4-0 with a 2.13 ERA. And the Astros give the ball to their fellow righty, Lance McCullers, who's 3-1 with a 2.96 ERA. So let's take a look at the line as it opened. Houston was a hefty minus 170 home favorite. Texas is a plus 155 road dog. Now, the pro bettors and the general public seem to be together on this one because they both like the Astros, and we've seen the money get pushed up from minus 170 up to minus 180 on the money line. Houston has owned their fellow American League Western opponents all season long. They're at 21-9. That's 64% against teams within their division. If they're at home, Houston improves to 72% within division games. The Astros are going to be they're good in their hitting. They're going to be relying on their hitting in this one because Houston's hitting 274, which ranks first in Major League Baseball. The best hitting team in Major League Baseball at 274. Texas is batting 230, which ranks them down to number 23. The Astros are 20-13 at home this season. The Rangers are 10-25 on the road. They're the third worst team in baseball as far as being on the road. The Pros are also on the under in this game. The total opened at 8.5, but the under is juiced to -120. So some of the shops are already starting to drop down to 8 in this particular game. So looking back at the two games on tap for today, Baltimore Orioles against the Cleveland Indians. The Pros are on the Cleveland Indians. The Texas Rangers against the Houston Astros. Not only the Pros, but also the general public. They all seem to agree on the same team. They're on the Houston Astros as well. So that's the story on baseball. And just to give you an idea, once again, how that little method, system, whatever you want to call it, following the Pros and betting along with them has happened so far. Yesterday, we had two plays. Reds and the Brewers. Had the Reds, big upset, they won. The Angels in Oakland. Oakland was the favorite. We had Oakland. That one won as well. So we had two plays yesterday and two winners as well. We're up around 55% as far as picking winners with this particular system. So once again, today, Baltimore against Cleveland. The Pros are on Cleveland. Texas against the Astros. The Pros are on the Astros along with the general public as well. So let's take a break. It's our final break of the day. When we come back, we're going to talk about contrarian betting. We'll give you a little analysis of kind of how it works, why it works, and things of that nature. So this way, if you're brand new into betting, and you may be because we've got so many new states coming on board and more listeners coming in from those states, we're going to give you an idea as to contrarian betting because that's the philosophy that we espouse here. It's not perfect. It's not 100%. Nothing is. Just something to think about if you're looking in a certain way to bet. Do you want to bet on favorites or do you want to bet on the dogs? That's what we're going to go into right after this break. So we'll be back into the sports wagering zone right after this message. And welcome back. We are back in the sports wagering zone. I'm Chris Pardo. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening. We totally appreciate you listening to the show. Now, let's talk about sports betting as far as contrarian betting is concerned and how to take advantage when these betting lines are shaded towards the favorite. So, one of the main reasons that contrarian betting is a smart strategy. Aside from the fact that the house always wins. You always heard that the house always wins. And like I said, if you ever go to Las Vegas and you see those buildings up there, it takes a lot of money to put those things up and to keep them going on a daily basis, especially with the stars that are performing in them. So you have a general idea that they got to be getting that money from somewhere, and they're getting it from all you people out there that are betting, primarily the ones who are betting parlays, and if you're betting on the favorites as well. So the public bettors are always victims of bias, and it's almost always you get better odds if you take the contrarian side. Keep that in mind. You have to remember, odds makers, they're setting a line in a vacuum, okay? They're looking at it from a different perspective. Their number one goal is to make money and to maximize the profits that they're going to get. Because the overwhelming majority of you guys out there that are betting in the public, and you're not professional, and the odds makers always set lines with the public opinion in mind. That's what they're trying to do. In other words, what I'm saying is the odds makers know the public is biased toward betting favorites. They love to bet home teams. They like to bet the popular teams. They like overs because they like a lot of action. They like a lot of runs scored. They like a lot of points scored. We've talked about this throughout the past 5 years. This is your typical bettor who is a public bettor. Okay, as a result of all this going on, they're going to capitalize. The sports books, they're going to capitalize on these public biases. And what they're going to do is they're going to shade the lines in that direction. Shading, if you don't know what it means setting a line further toward the popular side. This forces the public bettors to assume added risk because they're betting artificially inflated or even worse lines than they should be. Now, for example, look at it this way. In Major League Baseball, the sports books know that big market teams, you got teams like the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Cubs, they're almost always going to get a lot of support from the majority of the bets from the public coming in. And because they're the most popular teams that the average bettor gravitates towards. So instead of opening the Red Sox or the Yankees as a minus 150 money line favorite, they might shade Boston or New York to minus 160 or 170. Now, public bettors should care less if the line is 150 or 170. They're going to bet the popular big name team regardless. They don't care. This means that the public bettors are always getting a bad number, and they're getting an overpriced line on the popular big name teams that we just mentioned. So if you put it in this perspective, look at back in 2016, Chicago Cubs. They broke that 108-year-old curse. They won their first World Series game since 1908. The Cubs were tremendous all season long. They went 103 and 58. 103 to 58 in the regular season, winning almost 2/3 of the games that they played. But because they were a public darling, everybody loved them. They were caught up in that fantasy. The Cubs finally going to break through. They're going to finally get into the World Series. They're finally going to win. All season long, this went on, and almost always they were a big favorite at a shaded price. If you were $100 bettor taking the Cubs, in all of the 161, they had 161 regular season games that year, okay, you would finish with a profit of $155. That's it. $100 bettors betting 161 games come out 155 ahead. Now, this shows you how popular teams can win the most games but barely turn a profit, or it could even be a losing bet because they're overvalued. Some might even have a winning record but are actually losing money because their prices are so high. So, once again, while these shaded lines hurt the public bettors who want to back that popular side, the favorites, they help us contrarian bettors who have enough gumption, brave enough to back the unpopular side, betting the underdog. Taking that example up above, just as the odds makers will shade the Red Sox or the Yankees line negatively, going from minus 150 to 160, they're also going to shade the other side of the line positively. In this situation, the opposing team may open as a plus 145 instead of 135. So a contrarian bettor willing to back that unpopular side just got an artificially inflated line of 10 extra cents. This way, a $100 bet now pays out 145 instead of 135, simply because the public bias toward that popular side has forced the odds makers to shade the numbers. Okay, so kind of gives you an idea as to what's going on. Now, while these shaded lines can increase potential payouts to us contrarian bettors on the money line, shaded lines are even more valuable in spread sports like football and basketball, where a single half a point can make a big difference. Let's say the undefeated Green Bay Packers playing at home against Cleveland Browns, who haven't won, let's just say. The odds makers know that the betting public will want to pound on Green Bay as a home favorite against an inferior opponent in Cleveland. So after consulting their models, the formulas that they work with, and the power ratings that they come up with, they come to the conclusion that the line should be set at 14 points in favor of Green Bay. Now, knowing that the public will be inclined to bet Green Bay no matter what, the odds makers shade the Packers from minus 14 to 14.5 or even 15. And because of that, contrarian brown bettors are now awarded bettors' odds of a free half point or a full point or more. So instead of betting Cleveland at plus 14, contrarians can now get Cleveland at 14.5 or even 15. Now, of course, if Green Bay wins by exactly 14 points, Browns contrarian bettors win thanks to the 14.5 or 15 shaded line. So the key with being a contrarian bettor, you have to stick with it, playing the long game. Don't look at it over a short period of time. If you pick and choose when you bet against the public, you won't see the same results that you're looking for. If you want to succeed, you have to make it a daily mindset. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. There's going to be days when popular favorites just go sweep the board. The public cleans up. But you can't lose sight of the forest amongst the trees, as we say. Stay the course. Think long term. A rallying cry among contrarians is grinders with blinders. Just keep grinding. As a contrarian, you accept the ups and the downs because you know that over the course of the long haul, you'll slowly build your bankroll by betting against the public, placing yourself on the side of the house, and getting the better numbers as well. So that's the story as far as contrarian betting. If you're new into betting altogether, kind of give you an idea as to some reason why you might want to start considering going to the contrarian side. Of course, people will be listening to what I'm saying. and they'll still go the other way, which is fine. But we just want to make sure that you understand there is another way to bet besides just betting on the favorites. So that's the story. Let's see once again what's gone on top four tonight. We have one NBA game, and in that particular game, it's the Bucks against the Nets. And in that game, the pros are on the Bucks in this particular situation. As far as baseball is concerned, we have two games on tap for today. Baltimore against Cleveland. The pros are on Cleveland. Texas against Houston, the Astros. Everybody, not only the pros, but the general public are all on the Stros. So that's the story for today. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show, gave you some information about contrarian betting. We covered the games on tap for today as far as the pro betting and which direction is going. We gave you an update as to how well those two systems are running. So now it's totally up to you. So it's Tuesday. Have a wonderful, pleasant Tuesday. And if you're going to be betting, I certainly hope you have a profitable Tuesday as well. So once again, we'll be back again tomorrow, 12 noon Eastern Time, right here on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network. Or perhaps you might be listening to us or might want to listen to us on one of the podcast platforms, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, you name it. We're on most of them as well. So thanks for listening. We'll be back again tomorrow, 12 noon, right here in Charlotte on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network. So until tomorrow, have a great day. And if you're betting, I hope you have a profitable day as well. Goodbye, everybody.